Yeah, buddy. I've been threatening for a while, and here we go. Is it necessary? No. Should I be working on something else? Yes. However, mankind has not grown to dominate all other species by making smart decisions. Some dude from Starfleet once said, just because we can do a thing, it does not necessarily mean we must do a thing. What a load of dragon doo-doo. We're gonna do the thing. We are going to do the thing. Hello and welcome to Pelicar. Come on in, fellow adventurers. Did you bring your spelunking gear? We're going deep into the underground realms of fantasy. We'll talk about subterranean settings on the big screen and small. Maybe I should have read those drow books everybody gets so excited about. Could have come in handy. Dits? Drats? Something like that. Oh, hey. Stay focused and watch your safety lines. We're going to classify stuff and make up some ridiculous nomenclature. We'll talk about things that make sense and things you shouldn't think about too much. Eventually, we'll get around to how it all reflects on my projects. The Heston campaign, Dresden's Tale, even the Silver Sentinels. Along the way, anything could happen. That's how scripts are like caves. You never know what lies around the next bend, and they don't have windows. We can figure it out as we go. I'm Lewis Nichols, by the way. Have you ever sat through one of my intros? If you have, well, there's a reason every video comes with an apology. I got nerdy young, back before it was cool. In the 70s, it was sci-fi. Star Wars was my first trip to the theater, and nothing on TV beat Lauren Green as Commander Adama. In the 80s, I found D&D. It changed my life. Not always in a good way. I was part of a little group that published an RPG back in the 90s. Don't worry if you've never heard of it. I've published a few things on Amazon, not the game system. Over the years, I've managed to climb into the minor nobility of nerddom. That's not to say I know everything about everything, but today we're talking about caving, and on this matter, you can trust me. Have you ever been in a cave? If you haven't, you're not missing much. It's a hole in the ground. Most of the time, they're made by the action of water passing through the bedrock for millions of years. Water-soluble... Is that how you spell that? Doesn't look right. Hey, Google.
I'm not a spell checker.
You'd think we'd be better friends after all the times we've talked about the interesting tidbits writers and gamers need to know, like how long it takes for a body to decay in swamp water. Caves! Yeah, millions of years, soluble stone gets leached away and you get caves. Most of them are pretty small and inhospitable to life. They are not particularly extensive, nor do they go very deep. There's nothing to eat. If you happen to find a troll, it probably starved to death a long time ago. Luckily, we live in a fantasy world. Let's go! Type 1, the grotto. Grottos are more like big gouges than caves, really. Often they are artificial or nestled under natural overhangs. They can be pretty small or quite large. They're great places to shelter for man or beast. You get protection from the rain and the sun, but you still get lots of fresh air and probably some vegetation. You can even keep a campfire. They're hardly spooky at all. For a strict definition, I'd say it's a cave-like geographical feature that is protected from directly above, but still gets some natural light, even if it's indirect. Skyrim likes to use these for the hiding places of bandits and saber cats. The ground is usually going to be rough, maybe very rough, so don't be afraid to throw around those minuses and penalties. But it's going to be open, so you can bring in your archers. You can move around freely. You might even be able to escape with the loot. But really, folks, grottos are boring. Let's move to Type 2, the Den. You can find these on Earth. Most of them are pretty small, made by skunks, possums, garden gnomes. They might be natural, semi-natural, or entirely artificial. Typically, the den consists of a restrictive entrance leading into a single large chamber. The entry might be just a few feet in diameter, and the cavern just a little bigger. These are the lairs of bears, wolverines, and whatever vile beast you might wish to install. They are also root cellars, storm shelters, and the occasional small crypt. You find them in urban settings and out in the boondocks just the same. When dealing with a den, trackers are key. It may or may not be too hard for them to figure out who's been coming and going. Could be a family of kobolds, or just the cave that the local farmers hide their moonshine. Entering a den, even if the characters don't know it's a den yet, marching order is key. The first few characters in line could be walking into anything, and it might be over before the characters in back even knew there was a fight. But if you're a real adventurer, dens are going to be way too easy for you. Let's talk about Type 3, the belly crawls. Is that really what we're calling them? Maybe Spelunker's Alley? How about just natural caves or hydroformics? Anywho, these are the caves you usually run into on Earth. You will have some open spaces, but for the most part, you're climbing, crawling, or tumbling to your death. This is not two-dimensional territory, and it's not made for your comfort. Ceiling space might range from a few inches to a few hundred feet, and that's just in one big room. Meanwhile, the whole thing might be tilted at a 70-degree angle. Short and skinny are the key survival traits here, and the ability to see in the dark is pretty good. Using Type 3 caves in a campaign setting is a big decision. There are good reasons you don't see it much in pre-written adventures and movies. A character's first legitimate threat in such a cave system? Injury and accident. Are you prepared to kill a character because he got stuck? The DM said, "It's pretty thin." Ragnar not fat. Ragnar go. It's really thin. Ragnar can fit. Maybe, but you could get stuck. Ragnar go. Okay, let's go with just a general success roll. You can choose your strength, dex, intelligence, or wisdom, whatever bonus you want to add to the roll. Ragnar roll 3. Okay, well, you can probably pull back at this point, or do you keep trying to push forward? Ragnar crawl harder, push through. Ragnar stronger than rocks. Okay, roll strength. Natural 1. Ragnar go back. 2. Can Ragnar roll again? Then one day in a future campaign, the halfling slips neatly into the tight crevice, noting scrapes and gouges in the stone. Etched reads a simple message: Ragnar got stuck. As a side note, this kind of thing can be a good test of character. Does the player argue? Hey, I wouldn't have gone in if I thought I would die. Well, you were warned. And to be honest, the final fate of Ragnar will be remembered forever. So much more original than being eaten by a dragon. To me, the biggest issue that stems from big-boned characters, those beefy members of the party, they're going to get left out. Again, this is an opportunity and a curse. It gives the little guys a chance to shine. It means caving and climbing skills, they're finally going to pay off. It means dark vision comes into full effect. But maybe you have a player or two that are just not involved for the session. And that's never any fun. Looking at this in another light, you may run a world where adventuring opportunities are limited. There might be competition for jobs. Forming up a group of capable spelunkers could give your fighting team an edge over the others. These are the realms of tiny creatures with limited dietary needs, and those with the ability to move easily to a food source, usually in the outside world. Mineral-eating oozes are at home here, as are bats. Near the surface, giant insects and arthropods might be common. We're talking about fantasy here, so it's also possible to have a more complete ecosystem in place. But we're going to talk about that sort of thing all at once, here in just a little bit. From an adventuring point of view, the value of exploring these caves is really up to the GM's take on the world. My conceptualization of fantasy environments usually includes a pseudo-natural process that creates adventure. In short, it's in the best interest of powerful beings for the world's Velito to progress in ability and power. This is done by facing hazards, thus hazards are offered for their consumption. Hence, it's perfectly logical to find a chest of gold and a magical sword down in the deepest depths of a belly crawl. You might even find out the damn chest won't fit through the tight spaces your party had to negotiate to get to it. A second magical process will lure in and nurture dangerous beasts to protect the loot. A bear might be called to venture deep into a dark lair, over time gaining strength and virtual immortality in guarding a magical treasure. Does this mean every cave has treasure? No. Does it mean the characters understand this process? No. It does mean you should leave the party some idea of what to expect. If this kind of metaphysical transaction is completely absent in your world, let the players know that fighting their way into a rattlesnake den is probably not going to yield any wealth. On the other hand, if the opposite is true, rumors will likely circulate about the occasional incident of treasure in strange places. In fact, there may even well exist a rudimentary understanding of the process. Now, really, the main thing to understand about Type 3 caves, they suck. You're crawling around. Even with these magical exchanges, there's not much treasure. Really, they're pretty boring. Let's move on to Type 4, the dungeon. This designation covers a lot of circumstances, but it all ends up with the same result: hallway looking tunnels and large rooms with tall ceilings and even floors. This might be the sewers of a great city, the ancient warrens of a dwarven enclave, burial crypts, or even actual dungeon levels below a castle. They can be any size, ranging from a short mine shaft and some side tunnels, all the way to mega dungeons with hundreds of levels, every one extensive and far ranging. This designation is extremely fuzzy on either end. Many of these caves might be nothing but a den with a short side tunnel, allowing an argument be made for either label. On the larger end of the spectrum, it might be so extensive as to be argued it's a portion of the underneath, something we'll get to shortly. The restrictions of a Type 3 become the inconveniences of Type 4. Adventurers will rarely need to stoop. Big slashing weapons and two-handed weapons might be penalized, but then again they might not. Some dungeons might even be welcoming to the largest of Velito, such as Centaur or Goliath. In Lord of the Rings, the mines of Moria are a grand example of this type of cave system. So are the bug tunnels from Starship Troopers. One could easily argue the lowest levels of Coruscant also should be included. Skyrim is ground zero for Type 4s. You can hardly throw a rock without hitting one. Oh, a cave. I wonder what's inside. Damn it, Lydia, we were just in there. While it's not impossible for such labyrinths to be nothing but bare rock and stale air, in a fantasy setting I see no reason why some, or even most, would not have developed some ecosystems. There are so many ways this can occur, it's a shame to pass up the opportunities. However, as I teased before, we'll get to all of that in just a moment. If you allow a basic food chain to exist, there is no reason almost any scale and type of creatures can't live here. But it's going to take some effort from the world builder. I'm not sure if I've ever seen a fully fleshed out multi-level food chain developed for a subterranean setting. They're probably out there, so track them down and steal what you can. Usually, this stuff is hand-waved to mushrooms and never spoken of again. Before I go over the top, let's talk about a version 4.5. When I say that level 4 includes the mines of Moria and other large cave systems, you can draw a line here, set some limits. Once you get so big, you functionally run it the same way. You might have a variation in flavor, but it's essentially the same experience. As big as they get, these Type 4 cave systems, even the ones we're saying might be 4.5, still interact with the surface above, even depend on the surface. They might be 50 miles of tunnels, or even hundreds, or thousands, but they are not what lies beneath. Almost every fantasy world has some form of great underground cave system of continent-spanning caves. According to Wikipedia, and they're never wrong, it's a legitimate subgenre of science fiction and adventure fantasy. This is Dante's Hell, and the many versions of Hollow Earth, from Hellboy to Godzilla. For our purposes, the most popular is Forgotten Realms and the Underdark. I don't consider my own world to be hollow, but many parts of it do support a sprawling network of large passageways. Some go on for hundreds or even thousands of miles and are large enough for wagon-capable roads, with towns and cities growing where resources support trade and commerce. There is no continent that cannot be traveled to via the network, but there are some stretches that are far more difficult and dangerous than others. I believe this is something a GM should decide in the first few hours of world building. Does this world support continent-spanning networks? If yes, do they affect the surface world? If yes, do they affect the realms where my characters are interacting with the world? If that last one's a yes, you've added some work for yourself. If not, you can put it off, but don't forget it entirely. Before jumping into our last two subjects, just a quick note. Just like a campaign world doesn't have to have an underneath, a subterranean world doesn't have to have a surface. Personally, I have a few planes of existence that are just endless caves. This might be your elemental plane of Earth, or it could be your prime material. It's your world, and your vision does not have to conform to the norm. Now, what about light sources? I should start out by saying my low light and heat sensitive vision, it's pretty generous. By my written rules, dwarven vision extends to nearly 100 feet, with an equivalency of twilight conditions. You can read by it. Tagara can see for miles. If there is at least some light, their keen eyes can amplify. In addition, similar vision can be acquired via skills or a variety of magical items. On top of it all, super long duration magical light is a second level incantation for many priests. Even if the party doesn't have such a priest, these eternal light stones can be purchased for only a few hundred bits. In all likelihood, they might just be handed over if your team has sponsors. The point is, on Pelakar, light isn't really an issue, but it's up to you and your world. You're the world builder. You decide how easy it is for your characters to see in the dark. If you're running a horror setting, nerf that shiznit. Now, of course, this all still leaves naturally occurring light sources. Again, it's just me, but on Pelakar, low glow fungi, moss, and other plant life has been encouraged throughout these underground regions. This is especially true for species that are still dim enough for heat sensitive vision to activate. If you don't want to deal with the difficulties of vision and still run an underground campaign, you can throw in glowing crystal formations. There's no reason not to. These can range from a brightness from a kid's nightlight all the way up to full sun mode. Maybe there's a few scattered along the corridors, or maybe one hangs high on the roof of a mile-wide cavern. I have a lot of Type 4 cave systems and a big old underneath. I have enough room for doing everything somewhere. A fact that lets me work within a region and make it far from homogeneous. Not all caves are created equal. Not even close. And now, what none of you have been waiting for, subterranean ecosystems. This is textbook stuff, and I'm not even close to an ecologist, or biologist, or zoologist. I'm just a world builder. I do know that ecology is like a pyramid. At the base are the autotrophs. These are life forms that get their energy from either the sun or from chemicals. The last type is what we're interested in. On Earth, they're bacterial, called chemoautotrophs. Geez, these guys are worse about naming things than I am. On Pelakar, they're not just bacterial, and they don't have to be on your world either. I have a few forms. The first are a class of zoala I call lithics. These guys are animals, but made up of stone, with little or no soft tissue. Skipping a breakdown of their whole biology, it's that soft tissue we like, because something more similar to an earth animal can eat it. Next, we have the oozes. We don't really think about dead oozes, but after these guys are gone, they are edible to some creature types, mostly specifically evolved subterranean insects. Depending upon where you're at exactly, they can produce a respectable amount of digestible content. And finally, we have the most common form of autotrophic life, the semi-lithic plants. You can imagine these guys just about in any form a surface plant might take. I usually go with ferns and hostas, sometimes vines, but I've always been partial to ground cover. There's no reason it can't be grass, shrubs, or a stone-gripping rosebush. And don't forget, you can make them glow as well. Just remember, you don't have to convince a board of botanists your ecosystem is possible. Your audience already believes in fireball-hurling wizards and swords that talk. Once you've established your autotrophs, the rest is easy. Critters eat them. Bigger critters eat the autotroph eaters, and pretty soon you have a lush, vibrant biome. You can fill it as much as you like. Maybe your life is isolated to big cavernous zones where semi-magical crystals enable large fields of tasty meals for cave-dwelling bunnies ridden by intelligent geckos. In between these magical places are long stretches that amount to barren deserts between the oases. Maybe you've got chambers where hanging mushrooms grow by the millions. When they reach a certain weight, they drop into the waiting mouths of big-mouthed blind bass. Albino halfling monks live around the outskirts of the lakes, fishing for the meals and contemplating the secrets of the universe. 50 miles down, great wars are fought between clans of deep dwarves. They are not fighting for iron and gold, they have both in abundance. Instead, they battle for the illuminated cave of Quis, goddess of tea. Here grows the finest tea in the world, good enough to die for, according to their religion. One sip on your deathbed ensures that you will be born into the great above as a halfling monk. I think it's important to get completely out of your head from time to time. We're taught to follow certain fantasy traditions, and it's hard to get away from it. For me, it's a consistent struggle to avoid the medieval Europe trope. For those of you in other parts of the world, you have your own traditions. They're all amazing. As a historian, I love to learn about them all. As a world builder, that's what I'm trying to escape. Envisioning an underground realm is one way to do that. It breaks you out of the ruts you may be in and not even know. Once you escape your chains, I'm sure you'll find ways to add a freshness of color even in the darkest fantasy settings. I want to thank you all for joining me today. I'm not here to teach you about gaming. I just hope that I've inspired one new spark of creativity, or perhaps inspired some minor call to action in your world building endeavors. You all make the world a better place. You all matter. If you have gotten any enjoyment out of our time together, I hope you consider subscribing. With Season 3 of Dresden's Tale wrapped up, I've been producing a steady amount of world building content to the site. Big plans, my friends, big plans. Hit that like button, leave a comment. I'd love to talk to you in the comments. In the meantime, remember you are the most important thing. Have a great day. You deserve it. Cheers. Whoa, 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 whoa. Hey, wait. Come back here a second. I don't know if anybody realized this, but I wrote this script months ago and just never got around to recording it. You may have heard I'm running a campaign now, so let's talk about how it relates to our subject. It's a mountainous area, so there are definitely plenty of caves, all types really. Most are a convenient size designed to fit nicely into a 4-hour session. I haven't really restricted myself in any way. There are some belly crawls and plenty of Type 3, Type 4 hybrids. For the most part, it's a wilderness game so far, but they'll definitely end up in a cave or two along the way. What I really wanted to talk about was the underneath. I decided to go all in here. There are several major entrances. In the west, we have the Dwarven Kingdoms. In the east, the Drow Matriarchy. If either of these were sealed off from the surface, they'd still do all right. They interact with the surface world, but they don't depend on it. The dwarves trade with several other civilizations via subterranean routes. The Drow, they don't do so well, but they'd still make it. This is some three-dimensional geography. You have to get really deep to hit a direct route from the Drow to the dwarves. As such, most of their trade is conducted on overland routes, conveniently leading right through Heston, the center point of the campaign. If you look at a two-dimensional map, it seems like the dwarves and the drow are part of the greater Heston authority, and they do consider themselves a strong part of the culture group. However, separate on a government level. And the Heston Authority doesn't try to exert their control below the surface. When the PCs eventually visit one or the other, I'll do a show with more details. Right now, they're about to investigate some potential cult activity not too far away from the main entryway leading to the matriarchy. Anything could happen. I'll keep you updated.